Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we are going to be getting into the Chavez 229 series. We have the Ultramar 229 Tanto and we have the 229 Liberation here. I'm not exactly sure on the naming convention. I think this is an Ultramar as well, but that's beside the point. I think you'll know if you'll see Liberation, we're talking about this one. If you see Ultramar or 229 Tanto, we're talking about this one. All right. Let me begin by pointing out that I really like both of these designs. They're both very well made, very capable, very enjoyable, high-end folding knives. If you like nicer titanium frame locks, you will probably enjoy these. They are built by RATI, very well built, I might add. And so we're going to look at these two side by side. This will be sort of a review of each of them, but also a bit of a comparison. Hopefully there'll be enough information here that you can sort of know, which one would you be most interested in, which one is most appealing to you if you happen to be looking at both, or maybe you'll be like me and you just want to own both, which I wouldn't blame you for at all. So 8¼ inches on both of these in terms of overall length. Now that's really where the similarity ends in terms of size. Now they're close, okay, for sure they're close, but otherwise there's a slight bit of a difference in every other dimension. So blade length here, look at that beautiful blade, 3 5/8. Okay, so 3 5/8 is the length on here. We've got just a little bit more at 3 11/16 on the Liberation. In terms of the closed length, both of them do a pretty decent job of blade to handle ratio. On the 229, we have 4½ inches closed. Over here, we've got 4 5/8 closed. That's on the Tanto. What's interesting about that is that's a pretty darn good blade to handle ratio on both of these, but perhaps a little more impressive on the Liberation, which is, a 1/16 of an inch more on the blade and an 1/8 of an inch less in the closed dimension. So you're getting a lot of blade in a pretty compact package with the Liberation here. In terms of grip area, both of them are 3 7/8. I guess that's the other number that's going to be exactly the same, even though I said it wouldn't be. And 5.3 ounces on the 229 Tanto, 4.9 ounces on the 229 Liberation. So quite similar. Both of these are, on the thicker, heavier side, but neither one is really crazy, like just over 5 ounces, just under 5 ounces. Neither one, I wouldn't call any of these onerous to carry around in your pocket. And of course, the size on the Liberation is pretty darn impressive. I mean, this is not bad, but it's a little girthier, so you're going to notice it a bit more in pocket. Well, this is actually a pretty slim knife that carries quite nicely and gives you a lot of blade and a lot of utility. Thinking of blade, let's take a look at these blades next. Beginning with the Liberation M390 steel, 160,000 stock on both of these. And let me make the comment that RATI always kills it on the grinds. They do such nice blade grinds. And I will say this, the Tanto with the compound grind is extremely attractive. Even the Liberation, well, it doesn't have as much going on, just the simplicity and cleanness of it, really nicely done on both of these. Now, there are some differences that I want to touch on. The hollow grind means that the Tanto here is only 15 thousandths behind the edge, which is crazy thin, and it bites into material so easily. So I'll just give you a little quick cutting demonstration here. This is the thinness behind this edge is so impressive. Now, moving over to the Liberation, it's not all that different. It's 20 thousandths behind the edge, but it cuts extremely well. Now you can notice a bit of a difference. So as I move through this full piece of cardboard, you can notice a bit of a difference. If you double up the cardboard like this, then what's interesting is you really can notice how easily that hollow grind bites in. When you get to here where the transition happens from the hollow grind up to the flat portion of the blade, you can also notice a bit of a pinching there. All right, now moving over to the Liberation, it's a little more consistent, although it's a little more pressure required throughout. Both of them, though, I think do a really nice job of getting the balance right. That is, they both really do well in being thick, heavier, confidence-inspiring blades that are both, anyway, just perfect. I think I've talked about this, but 160 thousandths is about my favorite blade thickness. I find, that's a nice stout blade, gives you the ability to feel quite confident in your knife, that when you're cutting stuff, nothing's going to break, nothing's going to bend, you're not going to have any issues that way. But then both of them also, now they take different approaches, right? The hollow grind versus the flat grind. They take different approaches, but both of them do a great job of cutting while also maintaining that toughness. So really great, both of these. You can notice that this one's not quite as slicey as this one. However, I've said this a lot of times, in an EDC knife, that's not always the only consideration. Certainly it's a consideration, but there are other things that are going to come into the mix there. All right. So both of these blades are really well done. Both of them are nicely balanced, just in different ways. And both of them will do a good job with cutting tasks. This reminds me a little bit, less so with the hollow grind, but the Liberation for sure definitely puts me in mind of like a Cold Steel or an Andrew Demko, where it's certainly favoring the stout, heavy duty side of the equation, but it's still nice and thin behind the edge and still cuts really well. And so I've got to give credit to both of these knives for doing that. Visually, they're different, but both really good. I already commented on those beautiful satin grinds, but I think from a visual interest standpoint, you have to give some credit to that gorgeous compound grind on the Tanto. Really cool. So I like both of these blades an awful lot, and both of them perform very well. Great material, M390, great finish from RATI, and really great balance in terms of getting a blade that's tough and stout and confidence inspiring, matches the overall theme of the knife while still cutting really well. And that's something that you really have to pay attention to. I feel like a lot of harder use knives mess up that balance point, but these two have done really nicely. Next up is Lockup and Deployment. You can see similar theme here with this lock bar sort of following the pivot a little bit. Fairly aggressive relief cuts on both of these. All right, in terms of the feel, the lock bar tension, the smoothness, all of that, they're very close. The lock bar is quite accessible on both of these, which is enjoyable. And both of them have very stiff, snappy detents. However, and they do both suffer from the same issue here. It's a little more noticeable in Liberation. I'll show you why in a second. When I go to flip this open, my hands pretty naturally land on the pocket clip, meaning you never really have a problem getting your fingers on the lock bar. If you do, oh yeah, that does stiffen it up quite a bit. Over on the Liberation, though, I find it's a little easier. My fingers wrap around a little bit further, and they will land here quite often and end up putting pressure on that lock bar, making this very stiff. However, if you keep your fingers off the lock bar, which at this point I'm quite used to doing, then these are both very good. They're snappy, they're enjoyable, they're smooth. They will both drop shut. As you can see there, very smooth action on both of these. And that's, of course, as expected from RATI. Have you ever seen a RATI knife that didn't have great action? Because I haven't. And so the build is really nice on both of these. Now, I do have one complaint at this point, and that is this. Both of these knives are kind of special, interesting, custom designed knives. They're the kind of knife that is special and interesting and could become a pretty significant part of someone's collection. And the one thing that I wish there was done a little bit differently here was the bearings in the pivot. I really feel like on a knife like this, dual row ceramic bearings or multi-row bearings would be justified and very, very welcome. It does improve the action a little bit, and it does make for a little greater side-to-side strength. Now, is it necessary? Like if this knife doesn't have it, do you just throw it in the garbage? Well, no, but I just feel like it would have been a nice touch. And frankly, I feel like at this point, that should just be the go-to for any high-end titanium frame lock. Really, most high-end knives in general. If you're going to do bearings, just do multi-row bearings, right? And I don't go in for, add $100 to the price every time you do that, considering that Real Steel can do multi-row bearings for well, these are $90 from the Knife Nuts podcast, but I think this is regularly a $75 knife, and it has multi-row bearings. So I don't think it has to cost a lot of money. All right, you can do it and still make a pretty affordable knife. Neither one of these are super affordable anyway, but what I'm saying is I'm not suggesting that we put multi-row bearings in here and then now these become $500 knives instead of $350 knives. So wanted to throw that out there. It's a little bit unfair of me to say that. It's just my own personal preference, and so on knives of this nature where it's cool and interesting and special, I think we should be seeing multi-row bearings most of the time. All right, unless there's some justification for not doing it from an engineering standpoint, which is going to rarely, if ever, happen. So that's my only drawback. Otherwise, great action on both of these. The detent is stiff, they fire out hard, they're enjoyable, they're smooth. It's everything that you would expect from a knife built by RATI or from any high-end titanium frame lock for that matter. Let's finally get into the ergonomic. And I guess the point was you have to be a little more aware with the liberation to keep your fingers off the lock bar. Okay, but it's not the end of the world. And I'm very used to carrying this all the time. And so I don't even think about it at this point. I know that when I grab the knife, I kind of use the pocket clip as a reminder, grab it here, flip it out, works great. Never have a problem with it. Now, let's get into the handles. Here is where you're going to notice a little bit more of a difference. These do feel different in hand. The liberation locks that front finger in just a little bit deeper. All right. They both are quite hand filling, with the 229 Tanto being a little more hand filling, but a little less, locking in feeling. The G10 definitely helps over the full titanium. At least the previous Ultramar that I had, it definitely wasn't bad, but I really, really like the G10 in a knife like this. It really adds a level of texture and grippiness that is very, very welcome. And again, both feel good, both lock you in, but just in different ways. And both are hand-filling knives. So in a hammer grip, both of these feel really, really good and really, really confidence-inspiring. In a saber grip, same thing. They do, I'll show you. The Tanto here, you can get a little bit of a hot spot from the back in certain configurations, and if your hands are a certain size. For me, it rarely ever happens, but every once in a while, I'll go to do something and be like, oh, there's a little bit of a hot spot there. And then sometimes when I try to repeat it, I'm like, oh, I don't know where the hot spot went. But every once in a while, I catch a little bit of a hot spot off the back of the Tanto. Not so on the liberation. It just puts your hand in a slightly different position and therefore doesn't have that. Okay. So handle ergonomics are quite nice. Handle construction is, of course, phenomenal. Again, RATI does a great job. The fit and finish is impeccable. There's nothing out of place. There's nothing that doesn't feel totally perfect or look totally perfect. And of course, talking about the handle, we do have to have a little bit of a discussion about the skull clips, which are very, very cool, but which I get are not going to be for everyone. For me, hey, I love the skull clip. I think it's cool. I think it's interesting. It adds a little bit of pop to the overall knife. Yeah, some people see that looks peeking out of your pocket and it may cause them to ask some questions. But you know what? Every single person that has ever seen this in my pocket and asked me about it just thinks it's really cool, right? I've never had anyone be like, oh man, why are you carrying that? Or that looks aggressive, or that looks, and everyone who's ever asked me about it, I take the knife out, I show them, they go, oh, this is so awesome. They just really, really enjoy it. And I think most people are going to respond that way. And certainly most in the knife community respond that way because these are pretty stinking popular. All right. So, I have no problem with the clip. If you don't, there have been some discussions about some Chavez knives coming out that don't have the skull clip. For me, that's kind of sad. I feel like it's a key part of a Chavez knife, but I understand that some people just, if you really like the Liberation design, and I can see why a lot of people would. It's a beautiful knife. Same with the 229 Tanto here. They're both beautiful, interesting knives. And if you really, really love it, but you just can't get over the skull clip, I think there will be a solution in the not too distant future. All right. I don't know off the top of my head of any aftermarket replacements. If someone does know about that, put it down in the comments below. All right, let's do some comparisons. These knives go in a particular class, okay? And these are the knives that, are primarily aimed at enthusiasts. They're really, really well built. They're, of course, based on custom designs. And in this case, these are both marketed and sold through Chavez Knives, which is really, really cool under the Ultramar heading. Okay, RATI does a great job. So let's start off with just a standard in-house RATI. This is the RATI Torrent. Again, I feel like a broken record even saying this, but one of my all-time favorite knives. Beautifully, beautifully done, and just a standard bearer in terms of what a high-end knife should be. The only significant departure, there are a couple things that I like here on the Torrent that I would have loved to see here. Of course, those large stop pins serving large external stop pins, I think is a really, really nice touch, and it does make for a very strong, durable knife. And since these are kind of going for strong and durable, it would have made sense. The other thing is this does have dual row ceramic bearings, and I would have liked to see that on the Ultramars. What else have we got? Okay, here's a great example of a large, hard use style titanium frame lock. This, of course, is the Bestech Togata, designed by the very cool, and I really, really like Morgan Cohen's designs. He does a lot of big, hefty, really impressive fixed blades. And then he's got this folder. He has another folder, by the way, in the works that Bestech recently picked up. So looking forward to seeing more from Morgan. I think the next one is going to be under the Bestech brand as well, instead of under his own brand, which I'm a little sorry to see. I really like the business model that these use, where RATI does the OEM work and they're sold as Chavez knives. Anyway, that's a little tougher here in Canada because the import laws are so stupid. And Morgan is, of course, a fellow Canadian, lives, in fact, in the same province as me in Ontario. So I thought I'd throw that one in here. But this is a really cool option where it's, a great design, really, really well built by an OEM. Very, very cool knife. And I think makes an interesting comparison. We've got another RATI knife here, sharing some interesting features with one of these. Anyway, this, of course, is the Sharp by Design Evo Typhoon. Similar idea to what Ramon Chavez is doing, although the way Brian sells these is you got to follow him on Instagram and you go through, a pre-order phase where it's like, you put in your $100 pre-order, and then eventually the knife gets ready to be, delivered, and you pay the rest, and away you go. It's a fine model, and I do like it in the sense that, if you want one, you can pay attention and you can probably get in on the pre-order. These are a little bit annoying because you've got to follow, you've got to kind of keep an eye on where they're available, what retailers have them, and kind of order, hopefully, before they all sell out. We could have a whole video discussing which option is better. Both are not ideal, and it's a challenge, and I get that, anyway, different discussion for a different day. All I will say is the similarity here is that these are all RIAT builds. They're also all sold under a particular brand. So this one's sold by Sharp by Design. These are sold, of course, by Chavez. And I really, really like that model because it makes you feel like you're getting something from Ramon Chavez or from Brian Nadeau, even though you can't afford a custom. And the way RIAT builds these things is so impressive that they're in some cases, they're probably better than customs, certainly better than handmade customs, because nobody by hand is likely to hit the level of precision that RIAT is hitting. Now, Brian, of course, all of his customs are going to be CNC'd and they're going to be perfect and amazing. And same with Ramon Chavez. So anyway, it's a great option though if you're someone like me who, a custom is just not in the cards. What else have I got for you? Let's throw in the WE Knives Synapse. This is again a different approach. WE Knives here is building this under their brand, and it's the James O. Young Synapse that came out back in the 90s. So again, but what's cool about all of these, is you get these really cool features, really high end, really well put together, and like almost perfection in terms of the build quality and the implementation of the design. And you still get it at a price that's, yes, not cheap, but it's also not insane. Let's throw in one last WE knife here. This is the WE Knives Upshot with the little pop of color there. And this could be an interesting, this brings in a lower tier level of knives. So there are bunches of knives like this out there from Bestech, from Kaiser, from WE, and from others where they're offering something very nice, very enjoyable, certainly less expensive, and generally, although this is a limited edition, generally a little easier to get your hands on than something like this can sometimes be. All right, so those are a few comparisons and a little bit of a discussion about each one. These knives here are easy to recommend. They're very enjoyable knives. I really like both of them. I carry them often. They're really, really favorite knives in my collection. I don't know that I'll keep both long term. I have this weird thing about my collection where having two of these kind of bothers me because I always think, if I were to sell one, I'd still have Ramon Chavez and a cool knife represented in my collection, but I could have something else, right? I could have some variety with another maker, another, maybe another RIAT collab, whatever the case may be. I always kind of feel weird about having too many of the same thing or too many of something too similar, where I feel kind of driven to have variety among the knives that I keep. In terms of which one I would get rid of, I don't really know. I love both of these. This one is probably a little more practical, and I do, I'm drawn to the simplicity of the Liberation, but I also love the grind, the compound grind on the Tanto here. So there's a lot to love about both of these. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. Let me know which one you would keep if you could pick between the two of these down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to go over to White Mountain Knives. Both of these came from White Mountain Knives, so check them out. Check out Southern Edge Knife Works. Their stock has been a little low lately, but the great thing is when you find a knife over there, it's a pretty nice discount, 15% for using that Sharp Stuff discount, 10% for using the Sharp Stuff discount at White Mountain Knives. Again, I'll thank you for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. We'll talk to you soon.